All righty. We good to go, Janie?
Good to go.
We're good to go. All right. Well, welcome everybody to our very first Ask Us Anything webinar. We're trying an experiment today. We've done many webinars. I'm sure you've been a part of many webinars. And usually you have a title and you have a topic and you have PowerPoint slides and all that and some Q&A at the end. What we've noticed is that people love the Q&A. They love just the questions being answered and getting their specific challenge addressed. And we just, as we were planning out our webinars for 2021, thought, why don't we do just a Q&A only webinar? No topic, no slides, no nothing. In fact, we were joking last week that this is our Seinfeld webinar. Remember the 90s sitcom Seinfeld, the show about nothing? Well, this is a webinar about nothing, except it's about something. It's about your questions and challenges, fundraising challenges, plan giving, growth questions. We want to just spend this block of time with you just talking about what you want to hear about. And we've been blessed as an organization, Money for Ministry, just serving a wide variety of ministries, large national, regional ministries, local, smaller ministries, a whole spectrum. And what we found is that it's best to serve ministries the way they want to be served. They all have a God-given vision. Our job is to help them achieve that vision, and we're really excited about that. So on the call today, they told me I'm George because I'm bald and have glasses, and Brian's wavy hair makes him Kramer, and Janie's Elaine, and Doug will be Jerry today. And we're going to just have a good time. Just hearing what's on your mind today, how we can best help you in your fundraising growth challenges, plan giving challenges for 2021, and we're excited about that. So I'm Mike Buwalda, the founder and president of Money for Ministry, and we'll do a quick go around of the intros and dive right in. Doug?
Excellent. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, my name is Doug Baus, Vice President for Client Services at Money for Ministry. And I guess if I'm Jerry, then you need to imagine that these are all cereal boxes behind me, not books. So that will be my backdrop for today. And always, if you've been on a call with me before, I've been with Money for Ministry almost coming up on 6 years. Prior to that, served as a pastor in parish ministry in a congregation and parish out in Northern California. One of the things I think most prepared me for this role in that role was being really part of creating a system to move people who are on the outside of the church, kicking the tires of faith, and helping them move to the center. And in our current role, we do the same thing with legacy prospects and donors, move them from really just awareness of the idea to interest, I'm thinking about it, to action, I've done it. And I've included my favorite charities in my will.
My name is Brian Miso. I'm Client Care Account Manager, and really what I've enjoyed the most in the last 15 months since I joined Money for Ministries is coming alongside wonderful ministries like yours and your donors to really look at stewardship and the God-given resources that He's given to all of us and how to steward those resources. And so I've known Money for Ministry for 5+ years, and I've certainly appreciated the team. And prior to that, I've got about 15 years of experience in the legacy giving, plan giving area, a couple different Christian community foundations, as well as being a plan giving director for a ministry. And Doug mentioned that he was a pastor. I was not a pastor, but my father was a pastor, and a missionary. So I'm a PK and an MK, so don't hold that against me.
And my name's Janie Behrens, and I've been with Money for Ministry for coming up on a year and a half. Started right before the pandemic. And I work in client care. I work with a lot of you all, if you're on this call and you're a client. And I really I work with a lot of our new clients, so just introducing you all to the program. I enjoy working with clients on the messaging and marketing and how they can talk with their donor base about plan giving in a way that's not intimidating or scary and just normalizes it for your donor base. So my background is in teaching and language. So yeah, just the language of it all is interesting to me. And before we get started on questions here, you all sent in a lot of prepared questions, a lot of questions in the registration form, which is great. We're really excited to tackle some of those. We also have a Q&A box here at the bottom of your Zoom window. So as you have questions that come up, please feel free to put them in that box. You can just click where it says Q&A and the box should pop up. So we'll try to address as many of those as we can today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Doug.
Excellent. Thanks, Janie. Yeah, just to reiterate what Janie said, any question is a good question, and we're going to work through some themes, but if we see one that fits as we're going along, we're going to definitely take it. So welcome those. I also wanted to comment, I see in the comment or the chat window that many of you are writing in and your name and where you are from around the country. Love to see that. There's people from Florida and from Arizona and from places all over the United States. So here's one from California. It's in New York. It's great to see so many of you on today. Welcome. We're glad to have you with us. We're going to get started, and I've tried to group some of the questions in themes based on what I heard from some of the initial registration questions. And we're going to start at the beginning because Fred from Oklahoma writes, I have no planned giving program and I have no plan. How do I get started? And so that's how we're going to start things off today. And Mike, I'm going to ask if you could kick us off with that one.
All right. Great question, Fred. This is why we started Money for Ministry, was to answer this question. We have no plan for planned giving growth. And what we've done is we have researched what's working in the Christian and Catholic nonprofit world to say, well, what is working and how do we build that into a plan that any size organization can pick up and run with? In fact, we summarize that in our book, Ride the Wave. If you want a free copy of that, go to our website, moneyforministry.com. It's an easy read, 5-step guide to launch your plan in planned giving. And not some theory of what might work, but how do you maximize your God-given potential? It's 5 things. We call it the 5 pillars. And I'll just list them here. And I think we may have a chance throughout the call to unpack a little more in detail, but I'll list them here. If you want to have more detail, hang on for the call or grab the book at the website. Anyway, the 5 pillars are, you need a goal to keep you going. What's the compelling, clear, numeric goal that we're all going to rally behind? Number 2, we need a message for the masses. How are we going to communicate planned giving across all channels to our donors? Are we going to do the traditional terminology and techniques, kind of the attorney jargon, or do more of the faith and family approach, which we recommend? You need a message for the masses. Number 2, you need a way to interact with the interested. How do we develop a pool of people who are potentially interested in planned giving with our organization? Who are they? How do we find them? How do we engage them? You need a strategy to interact with the interested. Number 3, you need a way to connect with the committed. As you have this pool of people growing that says, yes, I'm in, you're in my plans, you're in my will. How do we connect with those folks? How do you nurture that relationship of known legacy givers? And number 5, traction with the team. If you're a 1-person shop, 3-person shop, 30-person shop, we need to find a way to have traction with your team to say, how do we amplify this team for maximum estate gift benefit? We look at the passage where God said to Moses, Moses, what's in your hand? That's our first question with any team. What's in your hand? Do you have 1 person? Do you have a newsletter? Do you have a annual gala? Whatever it is that your team has in your fundraising efforts, your development efforts, we start with that and we build around that to say, how do you have traction with that? Those are the 5 pillars very quickly. I'm sure we'll have time to unpack that as we go, but that's what I would say for starting a program, to have a plan, those 5 things.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. I think you've almost answered really the second question too. Cynthia from Ohio, what are the nuts and bolts to maximize fundraising potential in the area of planned giving, and what are the necessary tools? So I think what we mean to say here, we're going to unpack those all. Again, what are you doing how are you messaging this? How are you dripping that out? How are you creating that conversation with planned giving prospects? How are you moving them along? What are you doing with donors that have already committed? And how are you including your team in that? So again, not to reiterate, but to really see, I think that question is already been answered in that form.
And I think, Doug, just to get started, there was another question, I believe somebody had sent in a question about you know, we're not ready to move forward until we have 100% certainty of what we're doing. And I think there again, Scripture has plenty of examples where the Lord is saying to us, take that first step, you know, crawl first in this, and then you can walk, and then you can run. Don't worry about running out of the gate, but be faithful and start moving. So take that first step and go down the path, and I will lead you as you go.
Awesome.
Good.
Thanks, Brian. All right, next question here. Lisa from Michigan. What's the best way to start from scratch when I know so little? And Janie, you're one of the newer members of our team. I don't think necessarily the newest, but how would you answer that? Starting from scratch, somebody who's almost done has nothing yet.
Yeah. So a lot of people get intimidated by thinking about how to start a plan giving program because they're not a plan giving expert. And I'm not a plan giving expert, to tell you the truth. The good news is you don't need to be a quote unquote expert to talk to your donors about plan giving. What we find with the partners that we work with is most donors aren't really wanting to have a super technical conversation about plan giving, but they just need to become aware that leaving a gift in their will to a charity that they care about or an organization that they care about is an option. And most of your donors, if they're approached in the correct way, would be very open to that. So the place for you to start isn't with all of this jargon or terminology and techniques, as we call it, but start by talking with them about their passion for your ministry or how they can care for their family by having an up-to-date will. So just some of those more general kind of themes. Does anyone else want to add to that?
Yeah,
I was just thinking of Dr. Russell James that a lot of us probably know, and that on your theme, Janie, about the technical terms. Use that family language when in your communications. And I thought recently, even with an aging father before he passed away, if I was going to talk to him about a gift in a will, I wouldn't use the word bequest. Or if I was going to try to convey the concept of a charitable gift annuity, I'd say, hey, Dad, did you know there's a way for you to get an income and bless your favorite ministries in the process? And so I think, we have to be real careful with that language. Use language that the common person out there understands and can relate to.
So many people, Brian, you're so right. Those of us who work in fundraising use terms that we are familiar with, but our donors struggle. Bequest, I think I know what that means, but what is that exactly? I find I run into this too with so many clients where, Janie, you mentioned that starting at the awareness level, it's so easy to start at the interest level. So a ministry will want to say, please, they want to include an offer, maybe a checkbox. Please send me some information on including this ministry in my will. Or I would consider, these are great questions, but these are for people, I would consider including this ministry in my will. But that's the kind of response that somebody who's already aware of this gift in the will, who's already thought about it and is ready to take action. That's such a small percentage of the donors in your file that are at that step. Let's back it up and let's start to talk about what does it mean to leave a legacy? What does it mean to pass on your values? What does it mean to help my kids and grandkids understand why I love you and I love this ministry? And that becomes the starting point. We should ask more questions along that line.
I'm going to go ahead and read one of the live questions that's come in that I think relates really well. So somebody asked, can you tell us the questions we should ask potential legacy givers on a targeted legacy giver survey? That's a really great question because one of the things that we help our Money for Ministry partners to do is send a survey to their most loyal, faithful donors and start that legacy giving conversation. And in keeping with the theme of talking about faith and family, talking about your donors' passions, those are the kinds of questions that we put on our surveys. So you're going to not start by asking about how do you prefer to support us. You're going to start by asking, tell us how you connected with our ministry. Tell us how you became interested in helping the homeless or in Christian education or whatever whatever that connection for your donor is, because you know that they already care about your mission because they support you financially. And then you can start to ask those questions. How do you prefer to support our organization? And, you know, including us in your will is one of those options, but that's how you want to start, is just that donor centric, focus on the donor's interests, and then you can broaden that to legacy giving a little bit.
Excellent. I think Mike, you may have told this story before. It comes from Russell James about the ministry. They did a plan giving survey or questionnaire, 35,000 names. And I think this is a bit of an exaggeration, but the questions were something along the lines of, how old are you today? How much are you worth? And how are you feeling this morning? I don't think it was quite that straightforward, but how'd that go? Did they sent out a bunch and they got not many back? Is that right?
Well, Russell said 0 responses. It was a very transactional survey focused on plan giving awareness. You know, can we send you a brochure on donor advised funds or bequest or charitable lead trust? Very transactional plan give focus. Focus on the gift, not the giver. And as Janie is describing here, if we ask questions that really reach out to the person and find out the person, their passions, their preferences, their prayer request, opens the dialogue for a conversation. What you really want is to position your ministry as a trusted friend and partner, not some sales tactic, right? If you come at them trying to sell a planned gift, that's just not going to work. We say in the book, it's serving, not selling. So we come alongside, ask questions that serve the person and help the person along. And that approach is a very effective and long-term approach. We don't like the one and done hit and run approach, we call it. We love the serving, come alongside people and position us as a trusted friend and partner.
Awesome. Thanks. Hey, I'm gonna switch themes here. And one of the themes that came up quite loud and clear through some of the earlier questions was about capital campaigns. And my sense is that many missions and many organizations, charities, suspended or put on hold campaigns in 2020 because of the pandemic, because of uncertainty, just a sense of all hands on deck for whatever was in front of them at that time. And now it's 2021. We're starting to come out of that pandemic. We can see there's lights on the horizon, and so it's time to continue with that. So I think there's a lot of ministries that are doing this right now, but the questions have to do with how do you integrate planned giving into a capital campaign? So this is from Joyce in Virginia. How do we educate without sounding like we're hounding for more money? And I think that's in the context of a capital campaign. Mike, do you want to kick us off with that one?
Yeah. Great question, Joyce. I appreciate how you worded the question too, that in fact, it sounds like what I just said about serving, not selling. We talk about not people feeling like they're getting hounded for money, right? So let's apply that now to the capital campaign. Serving, not selling. Focus on the giver, not the gift. The way planned giving is often communicated in a capital campaign is we're going to educate the donor about gifting, right? So we're going to try to sell our endowment, or we're going to try to sell the tax benefits of planned gifts. That's all gift-focused language. People don't resonate with that. Flip it around and say, how do we come alongside the giver? So as mentioned, COVID's been a big factor, right, in the last year or so. So a lot of people are feeling or have felt uncertain. And in fact, what drives 99% of actual planned gifts to an organization is a life change. There's been some kind of change in my personal family life. There's been a birth or a death. There's been a change in our finances. We sold our home, sold our business. There's been a change in our health. Grandma has cancer. Something is changing. And now with COVID, we all have a life change, right? Life change drives legacy giving. And this is an opportunity, Joyce, to serve that need. So we're not going to focus on the fundraising side, the hounding you for more money, try to sell the endowment, the foundation, the tax benefits of CGAs and all that. Put that aside. People are feeling, when there's a life change, uncertain, unsettled, fearful. They have a heightened need to get their house in order. Well, how do you serve that? Well, we have several tools that do that. We have a Christian Wills Guide, for example, a print and web edition. We have online tools available. In fact, we partner with Dave Ramsey's group for that, his preferred vendor for that. We have a letter that mom and dad can read or communicate to their adult kids about their legacy plans. How do I help the person, serve the giver in their journey? That's the key, Joyce. Serving, not selling. Focus on the giver, not the gift.
Awesome. Got another question here coming from Peter in Michigan. And how do I coordinate annual fund, banquet, capital campaign, and planned giving communication strategies? So I think there's a sense of just all these things happening at once and trying to figure out, how do I do it all? I'm going to throw that out to the team. Anyone have a thought on that? I know I'll just take a shot at it, and feel free to jump in here, because I think this is, I mean, there's so much that we're called to do, and that feels like it you know, we've got to cover this space. We got to make sure we have a monthly sustainer program. We've got to keep the direct mail going, and we need to hit certain goals and targets. We have our major gift targets. We've got our newsletters and our communication, and we tend to silo it all and think of it separately. But in particular, when we think about planned giving, my recommendation is that it be integrated into all of that. So you're doing a campaign and you have a cash goal. You probably also want to think about, do we have a planned giving goal, so that it doesn't become this separate bolt-on activity, but it's just a natural part of everything you do. I've known ministries that clearly have a cash goal because they need to build a building, and the goal is to build that building in the next 2 to 5 years. But they also have a planned giving goal. Can we get X million in planned giving commitments? And it gives donors an option, so they can choose to give now, and of course that's important. They can choose to also give later, and we want to make sure that opportunity is wrapped in there as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a great point, Doug. Just to take that a little bit further, is you want to establish planned giving within your campaign, but you want that separate goal, as Doug said, separate goal for what's coming in cash as for now versus future expectancy. And why is that important? Because it allows for greater participation from donors in your campaign. Because first of all, you have some who cannot give right now. Again, COVID's a great example. They might have lost their job. They might have some financial issues, but they can give there in their lifetime. And then also what that opens up for is potentially largest gifts. Your largest gifts you will receive is from this planned giving side, because folks want to manage what God has entrusted to them. But it also allows donors to give beyond the checkbook. So again, you've got the cash and checkbook folks, but now you're opening it up to those who potentially can give from non-cash assets as well. So it's more giving, it's more charitable funds for the kingdom from both the current giving and either the deferred giving or the non-cash giving, which can also happen right now as a current gift. And so as we know, we've heard this from us before, we know that legacy givers, sometimes we tend to say, boy, if I get a legacy giver, it's going to affect our current giving. And we know that it's not true. It's quite the opposite. That legacy givers also give more now in the present.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I want to throw out a question from the live Q&A. A couple of people had similar questions. So Steve asked, this is related to, again, getting started with planned giving.
Mm-hmm.
When you speak of the importance of taking that first step, can you also touch on the importance of having established gift acceptance policies and procedures, having a structure in place to get started? Should an organization get too far down the road in marketing legacy giving before having that foundational piece in place? And then we had another question that was similar to that. So team, what are your thoughts on that? Established gift acceptance procedures, policies, etc.
Yeah. Brian, want to touch on that one?
Yeah, it's obviously a great idea to have a gift acceptance policy, because without that, all of a sudden you might be faced with a situation where, oh, we've got Mrs. Smith who's 75 years old, and she wants to do a charitable gift annuity, but she wants to fund it with real estate. And so if you don't know the situation, you might say, well, yeah, that's fine. But actually, a lot of organizations, I'm just trying to use that as an example, will avoid funding a charitable gift annuity with real estate. So having that gift acceptance policy of what are the types of gifts you're going to accept, what's the limit on the gifts as far as size-wise, because that might be an issue. You want to start with absolutely sitting down and figuring out a gift acceptance policy. Now, you don't have to have that in place for every gift because you can't anticipate what's going to come in, but you need to be thinking about these. You need to be laying the groundwork. And also along the lines of starting this up, I believe there were some questions about leadership and the board aren't on board. And so obviously it's important to have board buy-in and leadership buy-in. And so you can get that, and we can unpack that more. But you can get that buy-in by sharing the importance of what planned giving is going to do for your organization and what's going to do for the donor. Again, it opens up multiple ways of giving, and so we talk a lot about gifts in a will and in legacy gifts because those gifts really represent 70 to 75% of planned gifts. But don't forget about those gifts that produce an income, such as charitable gift annuities, charitable trust, and then those non-cash gifts as well. So you need a policy so that when these types of gifts come in, you know clearly where you're going to stand with those.
So Steve, if you want more help, Steve, on that, just hit us up and we can put you in touch with Brian for a sample or something and get you started in that direction.
I would just, and Brian's has a really strong background in a lot of that, and very much affirm. I would just, he also mentioned that a significant percentage, anywhere depending from 75 to 80% of all planned gifts are that simple gift in the will. And I wouldn't want you to halt on a program until you can get your board to do that. There are things you can do that wouldn't require that acceptance policy. Right. Certainly you want to have that and you want to work towards that, but don't let that be a stumbling block to getting going because there is a lot you can do without it. And
great point, Doug. That comes back to start crawling, start moving. You don't have to have all the pieces in place, but you want to work towards that. Absolutely.
Super. This question is from George in Kentucky. And how do I balance cash? Now, we're thinking in the context of a capital campaign and increase planned giving at the same time. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking more along the lines of, again, we talked earlier about cash versus planned giving, but sometimes in the context of a campaign that starts to look or sound like a foundation. Are we funding our foundation versus funding giving today versus giving later? Mike, do you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, just really building, Doug, on what you said earlier about the integration. I think if you think in terms of the campaign and plan giving becoming one priority, one thing, that'll get you a long way down the road here. So often we get that question of, okay, we're doing our campaign. When that's all done, can you help us figure out plan giving? It's like a separate thing. We'll get to it later when we have time or something has to happen before we can get going on plan giving. That will limit your potential. You're going to be way better off if you begin now thinking about plan giving as part of the campaign or part of your ongoing annual fundraising. It's part of the DNA of who you are. It's not something you just tack on. It's part of it. So in the campaign, we had that with one of our Christian university partners where they did this beautifully, and 1/3 of the campaign results was plan giving. And that's not an uncommon thing when you integrate it well. So how does that look really, like practically? Well, for example, when your campaign callers are making their donor calls, whether it's video or phone call or in person, every single call ends with, and by the way, have you ever considered including us in your will? That's a very accepted, open-handed, disarming question to have in any and every donor call in a campaign. Same for your reply cards that go out, for the mail appeals. Would you consider a gift of $500 or $1,000 or $5,000 for our campaign? And on that same reply card, would you ever consider, have you considered a gift in the will to our organization? Those things begin to open the door. If you get in the weeds, like I mentioned earlier, of trying to sell a foundation, sell an endowment, sell a glossary of terms of plan giving, here's some tax advantage things you can do, you're going to lose people. Serve them where they want to be served, and in the context of a campaign. I love that. I'm glad we had a lot of campaign questions, because campaigns are defining moments for you, right? There's an emotional lift. There's a unifying message happening. There's a platform. You have an amplified voice to your audience, and to not integrate plan giving in that is just a major lost opportunity. When we look at the most successful plan gift programs, there's often a defining moment. New president, special anniversary, a capital campaign, something gives it a lift across the donor file. And so I would just really encourage you all, if you have such a thing, and as many of you do from the questions, a lot of campaigns going on, I would really encourage you to unify these themes into one thing. So it's one voice. Take advantage of this amplification, and you'll be very, very happy with the fruit you see from that.
And Mike, you're touching on annual giving and plan giving. I think, right, a lot of times there's this thought that they don't mesh together. We can't communicate them together. We can't talk about them at the same time. But there's a term out there called plannual giving. And it's really that if you're a development team and maybe you're afraid about talking about legacy giving or vice versa, you don't have to be an expert necessarily in it. But to Mike's point, incorporate that. It's a natural fitting together two pieces of the annual giving and the plan giving, legacy giving. It just they go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to pick up on something that you said too, Mike, about the we say all the time, serve the donors the way they want to be served, and that's especially true. You think about cash versus endowments, or so. I mean, we've heard this many times. Some donors are extremely anxious to see their money go to work for ministry causes, causes throughout Christendom now. Today, tomorrow. There's people on the streets who are hungry. There's people who need this now. And then there's another subset of people who have a vision, a long-term vision for the future, and that often feels like an endowment or a foundation where they can set money aside so that in perpetuity this ministry will continue. Mm-hmm. Both are good. There isn't a right or wrong answer there, and so we encourage, however the money comes, whether it's through an estate gift, through a cash gift, that donors can have a say in that. If it goes to ministry now versus ministry later, they both serve a purpose, and there are different feelings on that on both sides.
Yeah, in fact, I'd say the donor world is split in half on that question, Doug. Half the donors love the now, and half the donors love the later. So if you got to kind of know your own audience in that question, or at least offer some options. So to Doug's, the phrase he used, serve the donor the way they want to be served. If you can is keep that principle in mind, you'll do very, very well in plan giving, both for future and later, now and later gifts.
Awesome.
I'm going to bring up a question, another live one that came through. So this is from Margaret. She says, we work with senior adults. Is it ethical for us to approach them about planned giving? So I'll just start by saying we do work with a number of retirement facilities or senior care facilities. And so short answer is yes. How do you approach these people? The key is remembering, what we've been talking about, serving over selling. So you never want to approach any person in a way that says, I'm trying to get your money from you. Of course, that's crass, but you want to remember that, everybody should have an up-to-date will. That's just a good way to care for your family and the people that you love and your senior adults who you work with. Many of them probably, I think it's, 70% of Americans don't have an up-to-date will. And if that's something that they need to have done, you have an opportunity to serve them by just giving them basic information on here's how you can update your will. Here's why we would recommend you have an up-to-date will or create it if you don't have one. And then if you are interested in supporting us through a gift in the will, here's how you can do that. But it's all about what's going to be good for them and and what they want. And for those who really care about your organization, I mean, that's something they're going to want to do for you and feel blessed by doing that. So yes, it's ethical. You just need to do it the right way.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the numbers that we've used often is that the average age for the last will revision is age 79. And sometimes I think there might be a sweet spot in terms of a donor life cycle somewhere between 70 and 85, where they're thinking about their legacy in pretty real and imminent ways. This is part of the life experience. Now, I don't know exactly everything that's behind that question. I've certainly been part of conversations and heard ministry friends, gift officers talk about there does become a point at which the donor it might be a delicate conversation, and the family might be concerned that mom or dad isn't with it anymore, so to speak. And to Janie's point, that's, then you have to use your good judgment and sense on that. But yeah, by and large, there's nothing to shy away from. These people are thinking about that.
As Janie mentioned, we do serve a number of senior care facilities, and if that is a question mark for you, what many are doing is they're engaging both their residents and the non-residents. So you could certainly start with the non-residents and just see the kind of response you get there. I think you'll find it's very, very good. But that's one way to begin, at least get the ball rolling. And then, as Janie and Doug have pointed out, there's a lot of opportunity to serve the residents, not sell them, but to serve them and whatever their need is right now. And when you do that, there's much fruit.
Awesome. I want to transition and talk a little bit about plan giving communication. So if you go back to that 5-pillar strategy that Mike outlined at the beginning, and he talked about messaging to the masses, this is going to feel a bit more like that in that realm. So this first question here from Ray Dean in Arizona. And Janie, I'm going to ask you to respond, at least initially, on this one. What communications, direct mail or otherwise, or what other marketing elements are required to grow in this area?
Yeah, so first I'm just going to give an overview of what the tone of that kind of communication should look like, and then a few specific examples. But when first of all, that's very good. You do want to be talking to your whole donor base about planned giving so that they're used to hearing about that kind of message from you. And then when they're ready to update their will, they think of you right off the bat. So the key really is to talk about it, as we've been saying, through that faith and family kind of lens, or through that values kind of lens. So don't start out with a very technical kind of approach, but talk to them about things like stewardship, transferring values. So what could this look like? This could be a periodic section in your newsletter. This could be an every now and then social media post. This could be on your website. You have your donation page and you have ways to give, and planned giving or leave a legacy is one of those options. So really just trying to make it available to them in your regular communications that you're already doing, and talk about, what's interesting to the donor. Because what's interesting to the donor is probably, as we've been saying, how do I provide for my family or make sure my affairs are in order after I'm gone? So an article on that topic, and then mention the opportunity to make a gift in their will at the end is a great way to do it. So team, what are your thoughts on that?
I would, there's a similar question here from Jennifer in Pennsylvania, and looking for new ideas to keep planned giving in the minds of donors. And I have some thoughts on some new ideas, but I just want to echo what you've already said, Janie, because there's really this consistency of dripping the message out quarter by quarter, year by year. So when that life event happens, when there's that change in health, or there's a death, a marriage, a birth, whatever it is, those things, you're top of mind, and the donors have what they need. So you have to continue this. So in that way, there's nothing new. It's not say rocket science, but it's really just continuing to plant the seed in a variety of ways. Now, there are some new things that charities and ministries are doing that we're familiar with. So, for example, there's a significant number of ministries that are now offering online wills at no charge to their donors. And that's something that we've seen with ministries we serve be very successful. It's a great way. We talk about the self-serve donor. I've done my will online. I did it about a year ago. Actually, I did it 6 years ago. I updated it about a year ago. And it works. And it's pretty easy. And it didn't cost me much of anything at all. And I went to the bank and they notarized it for me at no charge. And so it was just a very simple, easy process. So that's some ministries we work with are using that as a way to offer a tool to serve donors. So that's something I know. Using videos, like really short, quick, raw videos, can be another great way to connect with your donors about things that are happening, and there's some tools available out there to help you with that. Other new ideas that you've heard of or things you want to share?
Now, you touched on the one I was going to touch on is with COVID, and now we're sort of getting out of it. But the whole video, it's the raw, impromptu, non-professional. You can even whip out, we had a ministry not long ago that needed some funding for air conditioning down in Florida, and so he just the director just whipped out his cell phone, and for 55 seconds he went over, and here are the guys, they're working on the air conditioning unit, and this is a real need here in Florida. And so just impromptu, unprofessional, but it really resonates when it's just off the cuff like that.
Doug mentioned the phrase self-serve donor. So for the question about how to be new, speaking to the self-serve donor makes you new and fresh. For 40 years, Plan Giving has spoken in the language of attorneys. I mean, lots of legal jargon, terminology, taxes, techniques. That's been, and even today, if you look on the average ministry's website about Plan Giving, you're going to find glossaries of terms, and here's a chart how a CLT works and all that. And that there's a place for that, right? But that appeals to about 5% of your audience, of your donor audience. 95% of your audience is middle America. They don't have their own attorney. They're not fluent in the language of Plan Giving and all these financial terms. They're fluent in the language of faith and family. All right. So the newness, if you just talk faith and family language and resist the urge to talk in the legal jargon language, and for that matter, resist the urge to have to feel like we got to have an expert on staff. That we hear that all the time, right? Well, we can't do Plan Giving until we have at least somebody here, part-time or a board member, who understands all this stuff. The self-serve donor is 95% of your audience. Okay, they are not waiting for you to be experts on this stuff. Just talk in their everyday language. Make it past the mom and dad test. Would you show your mom and dad this piece of communication? Would it make sense to them? Would they enjoy it? Would they laugh at it? Or would they find it engaging? How do you engage mom and dad? Make that your filter, and you'll do very, very well.
I want to bring up a question that came up about stewarding your known legacy donors. So this is from a question from Cheryl. How can we be sure that if a donor names us in their will, that their family honors this? We were denied the funds once that a donor left for us in their will when the children refused to honor the gift. So any thoughts on that, team?
Brian, you want to share a thought on that?
That's a tough one, but it comes back to what we've been saying. It's about serving and stewarding. And so while the focus might have been on the parents, for example, there's also then the opportunity to steward beyond the parents to the next generation. And so to get to know those children ahead of time, even a little bit, especially if the parents have shared that the children are part of the process. A lot of times we'll get some responses that, and I've seen this in really play out quite a few times, is that the parents will say, well, we're not going to put you in our will right now, but we've given clear instructions to the children. Okay, so in many cases, the children have clear instructions. They're going to continue the parents' legacy. But if they don't, It's, if you have a relationship with them, obviously continue that, what we're talking about. Continue to serve the children, continue to realize that they might be the future, right, of that gift, and you want it to stay. You want them to honor the parents' decision. And so moving forward, you want to steward, you want to keep the communication open with the children. You want to understand their hearts, and you want to make sure that if they have some different thoughts, you can bring it back to, you know, what mom and dad wanted here, and you want to honor the Lord through the desires of your parents.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And to do that, Brian, as we found, you want to encourage your donors when they notify you, you're in my will. You want to encourage them and maybe give them a tool, which we can help you with. Help them be proactive in that communication with their kids. When you have these after the fact stories of, hey, it didn't quite happen how mom and dad said it should happen, that's often a reactive thing where the communication never happened. Our mom and dad's plans were kept secret. We have a thing called the Legacy Love Letter, for example, that you can help your donors customize, and it can be a written letter to their adult kids, or it can be a family gathering communication, just to talk about our love for the Lord, the kingdom, you all as our kids and grandkids, and the causes we hold dear to our heart. These are all important to us, and so here's what we're thinking, here's why, here's some scripture of our life testimony. Just have a tool to help people have the communication proactively rather than have regret reactively.
Yeah, there's so much about that, preparing the family, sharing. I mean, people, this is we get questions fairly regularly. Should I tell my kids about the decisions I've made? And the answer is a resounding yes. We find that many people, I mean, us included, we're reticent to talk about this. It's a hard conversation. Maybe the kids don't want to talk about it. Maybe we don't want to talk about it. Maybe we feel like there's some things that are going to be hard about this conversation. But having the conversation prepares the kids, becomes a way to pass on values, to make that legacy more than just dollars, but about the values that underlie it. It's such an important conversation, and it really preps the family so that they're open and receptive to those decisions that have been made. I was going to share an example. The question that you gave, Janie, started out with, how do you steward your legacy donors? And we talked about this ethical will, or this legacy love letter, two great tools to do that. I would just say my recommendation is that at a minimum, somebody who's told you that you're in their will should get 2, I like to say, touches a year. And by touches, I mean something personal, something that acknowledges their legacy gift, not just a newsletter necessarily that goes to 50,000 people, but something that's specific to them and their legacy gift. So it could be a personal note, could be a birthday card if you happen to know their birthday, could be a phone call, anything like that, a special gift at the time of that you become informed. Those can all be, if you do 2 things like that a year, you really are stewarding them in a way that the likelihood of that gift coming in goes up dramatically. One example of this that I heard just recently, I love this idea. This was great. A ministry, now they have a long history of receiving legacy gifts. So if that's not your case, you might have to adapt this a little bit. But they're putting together a coffee table book of pictures and stories of what legacy gifts, and by legacy gifts, I mean estate gifts, gifts in the will, have accomplished in the past. So you get to see 50 years of, look at the Women and Children's Center was provided for by a legacy gift that we received in 1975. And the new cafeteria is the result of a legacy gift we received in 2002. And they have a whole coffee table book. It's going to be hardcover, glossy pictures. They're going to give this to all of their known legacy donors as a way to say thank you. And they have it, and as a way to then to share with their kids, hey kids, look at what legacy gifts have done. And it's a way to encourage people who are thinking about a gift in the will to be part of something that's really amazing and has a long history. It's really exciting. And if you're a newer organization or a younger organization, I think there's some things you can do with that, perhaps. This is what we hope to accomplish. Somebody said to me once, legacy gifts accelerate ministry. Maybe you had a 3 or 5 year vision for what you hope to accomplish, and that legacy gift comes in. Wow, you can start to do it now.
Yeah.
Or maybe you're behind and it helps you catch up.
I want to
Good.
throw out a couple of questions related to budgeting and planning that have come through. So how do you, this one's from Melissa. What does planned giving look like in the budget? If it's based on a gift left in a will, we don't know when that gift will arrive. When it does arrive, is it designated as a legacy gift that is reported at the end of each year? So basically, how do you put some numbers on these gifts in your pipeline? And then I have another related one I'm going to throw out at the same time from John. I came from the university major gifts environment. What would be the appropriate metrics to use in faith-based fundraising? The former executive director shared that we rely on God and prayers. So thoughts, team, on putting some numbers on planned giving and what that looks like in your budget?
Yeah, there's a lot in there. Mike or Brian, what do you want to start off with that? Go ahead, Mike.
Well, Brian shared earlier about the acceptance policy. So you need to have a way to say, how are we going to handle the unusual large gift we weren't planning on, right? Estate gifts are oftentimes that. We didn't expect, we just had it just 2 days ago, a $3 million gift came in for a partner in Texas. How do you handle that? Well, you have to have a plan for that, okay? To Doug's earlier point about endowment, long-term versus the now, we had an organization, for example, do the Joseph Fund, where and the Joseph story in the Bible, 7 years of plenty, 7 of famine. They said, you know, whatever large gifts we're going to come in, we're going to spend it down in 7 years. So that was their approach to it. To kind of, you don't want to have necessarily like in a church, for example, if you have a big gift and no plan how to receive it, it might give congregants the attitude of, well, maybe we don't need to give as much this year. We got that big gift that came in, right? So you want to have a way to approach that ahead of time. How are we going to handle the large gift coming in? Brian, do you want to say anything on the back side of that? How do you do the large gift budgeting and such?
You have to look at what comes in. You have to realize that legacy gifts and planned giving gifts are much larger, right? Obviously, than current giving. So if you have an idea of your number on current giving, you can try to estimate and put a return, an ROI potentially. And it's hard to know, right? Because you don't know what that size gift's going to be. But we know from the Association of Financial Professionals and others that the ROI on legacy gifts versus current giving is 20 to 1, and at Money for Ministry, Mike or Doug, you can correct me, I believe it's more in the 40s to 1. And so if you use those kinds of ratios, you can get and anticipate and estimate a potential number from these legacy plan gifts that are coming in.
For your first while, you can't really budget that effectively if you're in your first 5-10 years of doing this and you don't really have a solid history of legacy gifts coming in. You want to focus now on the front side. Metrics that you're recording or reporting and tracking are donor engagement levels, new estate gifts notified, new interest. Focus on that for a good while first. Then once legacy gifts are coming in and you see some repeatable numbers, then we can begin to do that. And that does happen with our longer time organizations, been around a long time. They can have a number plugged in based on historical data. So that's a general, we can get more specific if you'd like offline, but that's the general answer to get things rolling the budget. Start focusing on other numbers on donor engagement. Once you see dollars rolling in, then we can make some budget numbers out of that.
We do know that the average size, now it depends, I've seen different estimates, but the average legacy gift size in the United States is around $57,000. So we like to use $50,000 as an average as we look ahead to project. So if you know you've got 10 gifts, or 10 families who have notified you of a gift in the will, you might say that means we have $500,000 in our pipeline, 10 times 50,000. And then we also like to talk about reported versus unreported. So sometimes, well, if you've got 10 donors who've told you, and again, this depends a little bit on the kind of ministry, a college or a university, it's going to be fewer. So maybe for every 1 reported, there might be 2 unreported. Colleges and universities tend to see a higher level of reporting. But say if you're with a rescue mission or another kind of, it might be more like 5 to 1. So for every 1 that you know, there's another 4. who remain unreported. Again, these are numbers that might feel hard to take it to the bank, but it's well established. There's been about 40 years of planned gift history and tracking where we've seen these numbers demonstrated, where a gift will come in and then 4 more will come in unreported. This isn't just pie in the sky thinking. It's real numbers. I know we're nearing the end of our time, and we're going to take at least one more question, but I did want to give you an opportunity. I've been able to just glance quickly at the questions coming in. There's many that we haven't been able to answer, and we did want to offer, if you would like to have some special one-on-one consultation, we'd be happy to do that. We'll answer any of the questions that you have remaining or that we were unable to answer in our time together. So Janie's just put up this poll, and you can, by answering it, it'll go away. So if you really want to keep looking at our wonderful, handsome faces, you can do that. Or if you want to block me and Mike in particular, then just move it over in front of us and you can look at Brian and Janie. But this has been a lot of fun for us, and we're just super grateful for your questions. Janie, are there any live ones? Because I want to give some.
Yeah, there's quite a few, and we'll do our best to follow up with those that we're not able to get to today. But looking through, here's one from Keith. So, are buck slips about legacy or gift in your will good to include in acknowledgement letters? So, are buck slips a tool you can use for that?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah.
Buck slips are good to use at all times.
Yeah, it's a great way to. We've recommended buck slips in a variety of ways. Some of that faith and family content approach, talking about the legacy. We sometimes say talk about values, but I've also seen just a really quick kind of survey in a buck slip, something along the lines of, please send me some information on passing on my values, and then I would consider including this ministry in my will, or I already have. So it's really like a 3-question mini survey. It fits great on a buck slip, and you might generate some leads through that. In fact, you will. And that's a great way to, I know there were some questions about how do we get some leads? And I know you can start with your whole donor file, and that's clearly overwhelming. But you get a few folks who say they would consider, or they'd like more information, or they even already have. Now you've started to get some of those reported folks to show up. Is there one more, Janie? Maybe?
Yeah, I'm looking for a good one that we can answer in a couple of minutes. There's quite a few.
How do you pick, huh?
Yeah. Let's go with this one. So another one, a number of our major donors stepped up and gave larger than usual gifts in 2020. So far in 2021, we're seeing more normal giving. Are you/others seeing the same? And is there any particular messaging that has inspired donors to keep up with 2020 giving?
So yeah, the COVID effect, and how do we continue that in 2021?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at that one. So the COVID surprised everybody as far as in general, giving was up, right? There are exceptions, certain sectors of the nonprofit world it wasn't, but in general up. People felt more generous, able to give, did it, it's wonderful. And now, as you're describing, some are seeing a softening of some of those major gifts. I'm going to try to tie it around to what we've been talking about the whole time, the integration of major giving or regular giving and plan giving. We often say the best way to maximize current giving is to emphasize future giving. So a way to think about those major givers doing more for you in 2021, 20 and beyond is when you emphasize future giving, you will maximize current giving. How does that work with major givers? We hear this all the time. Major givers, when they see a proactive plan giving effort, they come back with feedback to you to say, this gives me confidence that you are thinking about and planning for, preparing for the future. So there's a confidence level there. When people get engaged in plan giving, their own legacy giving, as Janie pointed out earlier, the current giving goes up. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One of them is just you're part of the family, right? If I include my kids in your ministry, and I will, you're part of my family, my psychology of giving. So I really encourage you to emphasize future giving as a way to maximize your current giving. More on that later, but that's the headline answer.
Awesome. Hey, thanks so much, everyone. It is 2 o'clock here in the east. It might be a little bit earlier if you're out towards the west, but we want to honor your time. Thank you so much for your participation today. The questions were great. There's a lot of them. Again, yeah, that Janie's put that poll up again. If you'd like to get some more specific answers, we'd be happy to help you with that. We're gonna we serve ministries of all types. We specifically focus on Christian ministries, both Protestant and Catholic. And in that vein, we'd like to close our time together in prayer. And Brian, would you pray for us today?
Absolutely. Let's thank the Lord for this time. Lord, we thank you for every person on this video, Lord. We thank you for every ministry represented, Lord. We are all here for the same reason, and it's to lift you up, Lord, and to lift up your kingdom through the various ministries and the various avenues that you've called us to. And Lord, you are the source, and we thank you that you are our ultimate source, and you have provided all these resources which we touched upon today. Just thank you for this time. We'll continue to bless each and every one, Lord, in our ministry responsibilities, Lord, as we seek to love you and to share you with those who you called us to. And we thank you for this time. Bless the rest of our day. In your name, amen.
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 Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Take care.